Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk a bit about OpenRouter, the Qwen models in particular, what we're seeing, and what we do. Have people used OpenRouter? Is anybody familiar? A couple of people? A few hands? All right, excellent. My developers in the audience. That's terrific. So a little bit about the thesis behind OpenRouter. What do we think is going to happen in the future? Well, over the coming years, we think that token cost, inference cost, is going to become a dominant operating expense for companies all over the world, right? Today, largely, OpEx is dominated for many sort of knowledge firms by headcount. As agents come online, as we start using more services like some of the folks that have talked about today, right? That cost for AI inference will start to really balloon and become a dominant expense. And for some companies, they're already there today, some AI native startups. We also think the future is multi-model. This is not particularly controversial today, but a year ago, before we saw DeepSeek, before the proliferation of a lot of amazing open source models, this wasn't totally obvious, right? It wasn't necessarily clear that the winners would just accrue to a couple of major labs, but it's clear now looking out that when you go visit the model zoo in 2028 or whatever, there's going to be a lot of different exhibits with a lot of different types of models there. So we believe that the future is very multi-model, where we have different models for different use cases, for different workloads, et cetera. And then as a result of this, we think that sourcing and orchestrating and sort of connecting inference back to business value is going to be an extremely horizontal opportunity, one that's not necessarily domain specific, but everybody is going to have to sort of turn on the tap and tokens come out, right? And everyone is going to have that problem. But what we want you to do is simply turn on the tap and tokens come out, and you can focus on your business and not worry about where they come from or where you're sourcing them or whether they meet your requirements. We'll help you do all of that and make sure that it's available all the time. So we are a small company by headcount. We're fewer than 20 people. But by token scale, we're actually getting to be a decent size. Also, notably, every single slide in this entire presentation is already out of date because I made it 2 weeks ago, right? And so already, like, everything is new, right? So monthly token run rate now north of 15 trillion monthly tokens, so trillions and trillions of tokens every month. We work with 60 different cloud providers and model labs. Probably most folks don't even know that there are 60 different cloud providers and model labs, but there's a huge growth of neo clouds who are focused on serving inference, a difficult business. Alibaba Cloud being one of those in particular that we work with. 500 different models, 2 million developers all around the world, a very global business. Oh, what do we actually do, though? I've talked a little bit about like some numbers and things. What do we do? Well, we are a marketplace and aggregator for LLMs. So we give you a single API, a single interface, a single billing relationship to interact with any of those 500 models, any of those 60 different cloud providers. So if you are a developer and you want to use LLMs to build a new agent, to power some workflow, to experiment, to do code generation, or if you're using an open source project that requires you to bring your own inference, you can go to OpenRouter, deposit credits, and those credits are fungible across any of those models, any of those labs, and we're going to automatically do failover and uptime improvement for you. We're going to allow you to state what your privacy policies are to only go to providers that match those privacy policies, right? And we also aggregate all of this data. So we are fairly quickly being viewed as the canonical source of how models are performing in industry. So benchmarks are great. We've seen lots and lots of things around benchmarks, but ultimately, are developers using the model, right? What are they using it for? How is it being categorized? What are the workloads that are most suitable to each different model? And OpenRouter, you can go to our site. We publish all this data. It's all live. It's being aggregated daily. Helps you understand which workloads and which models are sort of a good match, right? And we're going to do more and more of this over time. But we have a really unique global viewpoint on how model usage is actually being done in the real world, not based on benchmarks. So we provide not just usage data, but also real-time monitoring of all of these providers. And for a given model, like here, this example, right, we have Qwen 3 Coder 480B. Very popular. We'll look at the popularity in a second. Obviously from Alibaba. has come on really strong. There's a lot of different, this is an open weight model, right? So there's a whole lot of different clouds and providers that run this model and allow you to get and source these tokens. Well, we'll monitor them for uptime. We'll let you know how they're each performing. But what's really interesting, I think a little bit underappreciated, or maybe a lot underappreciated, everyone talks about model selection, like which model should I pick for my workload? What's going to work the best? Well, the model is like maybe half or 2/3 of the story. Ultimately, the product and the thing you're interacting with is that specific deployment of that specific model, right? The model weights define sort of the capabilities of it and the intelligence in a vacuum. But if you have a model that is deployed running at 60 tokens per second, and you have the same model deployed running at 1,000 tokens per second, those are actually dramatically different products, right? One of them is probably cheaper than the other, but one of them you can, at 1,000 tokens a second, like I can put that in the hot path of rendering a web page, right? I can do real-time personalization to users. At 60 tokens a second, I can't do that, but it's still very suitable for all sorts of agentic workflows where performance and real time is not as big of a deal. So ultimately, like we provide not only all those different models, but the different deployments of those models to match whatever you need to accomplish in your business. Our customers, we break up into 3 different groups. And you can think of our business as working with pretty evenly across these 3. The first are our enthusiasts and our developers. These are folks who need to like bring their inference to an open source project where they might be, or they're using an IDE and doing code gen, and they need to source tokens, and so they'll bring an OpenRouter key to do that. They care about the selection. They often care about using what's on the frontier and what's new. They care about the API compatibility. Next, AI native startups. So a lot of these companies sort of grow out of nowhere. These are everything you read about where it's like went from 0 to $5 million to $100 million in run rate practically overnight. Often, 80% or 90% of their operating expense is, in fact, tokens and inference. And in some cases, if they're doing 50 million in run rate, their token cost is actually like 60 million, right? And they're in a little bit of a bind where they might actually be losing money on inference, and that's a problem too. We work with a lot of these companies and help them grow so that they don't need to think about like quota management, especially as you're getting off the ground. Like it's actually not always easy to call these large cloud providers and get them on the phone and say, hey, I need to provision more throughput or something like that. So we will actually help you manage quota and rate limits, even help you in a purchasing process if you do want to go direct. And you can basically, again, not worry about where tokens are coming from, but simply build your business, focus on your unique value, and we'll help you make sure that we can scale up the inference behind you. And then lastly, traditional enterprises. So a lot of the companies here today. And what we often see in traditional enterprises is that we get brought in bottoms up. So we're a self-service platform, we're a developer platform, and what happens is developers know about us, they might have used us for a side project or seen us somewhere, and then will show up and start using us on an internal project or an internal team, and then we inevitably get a phone call from the procurement department saying like, hey, we have a team using you, like who are you guys, we've never heard of you. Like, do you have a data privacy policy? Like, what's going on, right? So that's how we often get brought into larger organizations. And I think on that note, right, the reason the business is working is because we are developer first and developers love us. And the shift that we're seeing for AI, right, and how AI is being adopted in organizations is like really different for people who've been around a little while than how like the cloud transition happened, right? The way the cloud transition happened was sort of a lot of enterprises were sort of dragged into it, like kicking and screaming, right? That's not what's happening with AI. What's happening is we have CEOs all over saying, you will use AI, you will figure out use cases, you will adopt this technology, right? And that's a very different adoption pattern than what we've seen in prior technology shifts. So as a result, this developer-first approach really works. And we saw that stat earlier, about 95% of AI projects fail. Yeah, I think that could definitely be true, but I don't know that it's measuring the right thing. The organizations that have had success with AI have given the capability to their employees and asked them to go figure out how to make things work. And when you give people tools, they'll figure out how to be effective with those tools, right? And tops-down AI projects do often fail, but bottoms up, we've seen a lot of success, and I think really speaks to the power of what we're doing at OpenRouter. So I had lunch with some of the Qwen and Alibaba Cloud folks earlier, and they said, we got a great compliment from one of our customers in the form of a complaint, which said, "You're releasing models too fast, we can't keep up," which I think is very true of Qwen. The speed and breadth of the Qwen models, I mean, you can't even read this, right? There's just so, and by the way, again, out-of-date slide. This week at OpenRouter, we've onboarded 6 new Qwen models onto the platform just this week. So the speed and breadth of the Qwen offering is truly impressive. And I think over time, we can sort of hear the vision from the Alibaba Cloud and Qwen folks. They want to move the needle on how much global inference is running in open versus closed source. So this is our data, right? Orange, we have proprietary closed source model. Blue, we have open source models. It's sort of amazing that this is like relatively flat. I mean, it's lumpy, but it's like sort of flat. And if you think about this, the growth that we've seen in our business from some of those previous charts, it's sort of amazing. It's like as flat as it is. We, from our perspective, would love to see a really rich and robust open source ecosystem. By the way, this is our data. It is not representative of like the truth, right? Because I do think one of the advantages of open source is, of course, that you can use that as a jumping off point for fine tunes and for proprietary models. And there's a huge number of those deployments that we don't see because we don't do that. That's not our business. So I suspect globally the story here might be a bit different. But I think that we will having a really rich open source ecosystem is something that we're extremely interested in. And I've found the Qwen models really exciting. And if we look at what's happened, right? Qwen's sort of coming out of nowhere here. This is, again, our usage data. And all of a sudden, starting this summer, like, Qwen is cooking. Like, here we go. Here it comes, right? The Qwen usage has just absolutely gone to the moon here. And what's really interesting about Qwen also is that if you look at these bars, right, we have this blue and orange. So this is Qwen Coder in blue. Some of the instruct models, Qwen 30B in orange, 235B in sort of the teal. People are using a lot of different Qwen models, and this is really unusual. Typically, we sort of see model labs as like a hit-driven business where they have one thing that like really works. So to see all these Qwen models coming on so strong is really unusual. And we've also seen Qwen perform really well in coding. So this is our market share of coding and programming use cases. Yellow here, it's a bit hard to see, but we have Qwen sort of trundling along, and then all of a sudden it's starting to take meaningful market share amongst both closed and open source for programming. So just super impressive performance. And I think also underscores like why developers and companies find OpenRouter so valuable. Like, this is not something you could have seen coming, right? And it would have been easy to like sign some sort of like long locked-in contract with, you know, someone else or another model lab, and all of a sudden you're going to say, shoot, I want to use this, and I might not have access to it. So again, having that flexibility has proven really valuable to our customers. So last, I just want to talk a bit about the market providers here. So this is, again, an area chart of who is providing Qwen models. I haven't labeled these because it's not super important for the purposes of this. But like every one of these lines or areas is a different provider of Qwen models, the exact same model. Really tough business, right? You are providing an open weight model alongside all of these competitors, and you have this interesting dynamic where, you know, a GPU that is fully idle is, you'd rather have it be at least like 50% or selling it at a negative 50% margin rather than having sitting idle and at 0, right? So you have this like race to the bottom dynamic around model providers of open weight models. So a few ways that we see model providers distinguishing themselves is around data policy, privacy, geography, and data residency. Really important to understand deeply what providers are and aren't doing with prompts. Also, of course, price, latency, so time to first token, throughput, which functionally ends up being time to last token, but then also parameter support and tool calling accuracy. One of the reasons that I think we've seen so many charts that are just like up and to the right is because the shift from chat-based modalities to agentic modalities drives token consumption massively, and that's really predicated on tool calling. So those are some of the ways that these various providers can distinguish themselves, but it's a very competitive market that we're excited to help companies source from models like Qwen, and we hope that family of models continues to grow. And if you haven't tried OpenRouter, I recommend you do. Thanks.